It's the year 2022. A young man named Henry has traveled back in time from the year 3000. He's been in the past for only a few hours, but he wants to explore, experience, and learn more about our world. He plans to spend as much time in the past as he can. He first visits the biggest city in the world at the time, New York City. He marvels at its size and chaos. And he is amazed by the technology and medicine of the past. He learns about the past through books, artifacts, and conversations with people. He also plans to make some discoveries of his own. He visits the Statue of Liberty, the Ellis Island Immigration Museum, and the New York Public Library. He visits the New York Stock Exchange, the Federal Reserve Bank, and the Supreme Court. He visits the United Nations, the World Trade Center, the White House, the Pentagon, and many other sites. Most of the time, he is alone. But sometimes he meets other people. They often ask him questions and want to learn more about the future. Some of them are curious about the past, too. They ask Henry questions and want to learn more about it. One day, Henry meets a young woman named Lauren. She is curious about the future and asks a lot of questions. She also wants to learn more about the past. They spend a lot of time together. And they have many fascinating discussions. One day, while they are walking together in New York City, Lauren asks Henry a question that surprises him. Why are there still wars in the future? He doesn't know the answer, so he asks Lauren a question. What is the most important invention of the 21st century? She can't think of anything, so he asks her another question. What was the most important invention of the 20th century? Again, she can't think of anything. This goes on for a while. Finally, Henry asks Lauren the same question. She thinks for a moment and then says, "The internet." Henry is surprised. "The internet?" he asks. But the internet was around for decades in the 20th century. Lauren looks confused. "I know," she says. "But in the 21st century, the internet has become much more important than it was in the 20th century. In the 21st century, the internet has become a source of news and information, a place to meet new friends, and a tool that can change the world. But in the 20th century, the internet was still in its infancy." Henry thinks about what Lauren has said for a few minutes. Then he asks a question. How is the internet different in the 21st century from how it was in the 20th century? Lauren doesn't know the answer, but she asks Henry another question. Do you think the internet will still be around in the 3000? Henry thinks for a minute and then says, no. It will be here for a long time, he says. It will be around for at least another 2 centuries. It will probably be around for longer. In the 29th century, a massive war destroyed all the technology. The 29th century is a world where people run around in gas masks and metal suits and blast away at each other with energy beams. They use laser beams instead of guns. They have to wear helmets in the 25th century. A couple of years later, in the 31st century, the war is over. People are rebuilding their lives. Henry and Lauren are still walking together. Henry tells Lauren about his plan to visit the Statue of Liberty. She feels bad for him but is happy that he is doing something he wants to do. They keep walking. Lauren asks a question. What do you think the future will be like in the 3000? Henry thinks for a moment, but he doesn't have an answer. It isn't easy to think about the future. It's even harder to answer questions about the future. It's a hot day in New York City. Henry and Lauren are walking down the street, and it is starting to get crowded. A truck drives by, slows down, and then turns around. It is heading in their direction. The truck smashes into the two of them. Henry is knocked over. He gets up. He is bleeding. She is dead. Henry is devastated. He cries for a long time. He doesn't know what to do. Her tears are frozen to her face and her body is frozen in the rigor mortis. The only sign of life is her eyes. which are still open, and she keeps blinking, although she is no longer alive. The truck is still there. Henry goes over to it and puts his hand on the hood. He can feel the blood running down his hand. It was a truck. Henry has never seen a truck before. It is pretty big. A truck hits Henry and kills him. Because the story ends at Henry's death. The story doesn't have an ending.